Can you feel it? There's a healing going on in the planet. We're in our Summer Sizzling series. No, I said that wrong. Sizzling Summer series about healing. And I'm resistant. Because when we talk about healing, it's kind of like one of those other words like forgiveness. A lot of times we think it's like a really big thing. Well, this summer, we're going to break it down just a little bit. We're going to look at what do we mean when we say healing, both as it applies to the body, to the mind, to the spirit. And what does it mean when we say healing and there's a realization, a revelation? John sang a phrase around a reminder that in healing, we get to a place in consciousness of awareness that there is no separation. Oh, wait a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me stop. How many of you got one of these little cards in your bulletin? It is a little advertisement from Unity Village. So for those of you who have an iPhone, and yes, even those people like my husband who have a Google phone, I think it's called an Android. I always think of some kind of alien. But anyway, it's a smartphone app that allows you, with the click of a button, to send a prayer request to Silent Unity at Unity Village. Now, personally, as a woman in my 40s, I am delighted to see that Unity Village is coming into the 21st century. When I was pregnant with our daughter 14 years ago, this month actually, I spent 2 weeks at Unity Village, and one of the things I remember the most is how I could not understand that there were no computers on the campus. And they said, don't worry, only papers are due at the end of your class session. There's a typewriter in the lounge. I was like, wait a minute. I went to college in 1990 and I used a word processor that was electronic. How do we use technology to know that within us is the power to be a part of the healing movement? This is one of those ways. And I wanted to be sure that you all knew about it, as well as our wonderful prayer for protection that's on the backside. It's an opportunity for us in the midst of perhaps having a conversation with a friend or a loved one and really going, oh, I wish there was something I could do to help them in that moment. There is. Because it takes less than 3 minutes to download it on your smartphone. You simply type in that person's first name, and it sends it off to Unity Village. You may say, well, what's the big deal? Well, it is a pretty big deal because there's a beautiful prayer chapel where someone is in physical prayer 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And there are actually 2 cabinets. They're closets, actually, with glass doors. And that's where over 3 million prayer requests are kept every day. And they're kept there for 30 days. So the power of prayer is part of what we as a movement are built upon. For some of us, we may know this story really well. Founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore came to be the founders of Unity only from their own journey. It was their own seeking journey. Myrtle Fillmore had received a diagnosis. And so I understand the story goes she'd always been a sickly child, but at 40, she had a diagnosis of consumption, given less than 6 months to live. Well, she heard a speaker, and his name was E.B. Weeks, and he's one of those teachers of the Fillmores, and we're going to see more of these teachers' influences over the next few weeks. You may know the name Quimby. We're going to talk about his influence on Charles and Myrtle's belief about healing. But E.B. Weeks was a lecturer, and I'm told there were 2,000 people in the room. Yet Myrtle heard the words, You are a child of God, and therefore do not inherit sickness. And there was something that was quickened or enlivened in her when she heard these words. Now, there were 1,999 other people who heard those words. And as far as we know, they didn't start a movement. Definitely didn't start a movement that has followers in churches around the world. Something in her consciousness was awoken. And so here we are today, because she began to speak to her body, ask her body for forgiveness, bless her body. And so the story goes, literally within 2 years, she had no signs of consumption, and she lived 40 more years. And the people around her saw this, and they came to her and said, "Would you pray with me?" And thus, we now even have an app for our phone. But there was a man who was sitting beside her in that lecture, and his name was Charles Fillmore. And while perhaps in that moment there was not something that grabbed his consciousness, as he watched what happened for his wife, and as he watched what happened in the community, he said, "There must be something to this, and I'm going to prove it scientifically." For you see, Charles also had an illness. He was involved in an accident when he was a young child, and so his left leg, no, I'm having to see a picture of him right now. It was his right leg that was actually 3 inches shorter than the other. And it was over 45 years of prayer and affirmation that his leg did extend, but it never was even with the other leg. And so sometimes people say, "Well, it didn't really work for him." Or sometimes people say, "Well, I tried that prayer and affirmation, didn't really work for me." Well, what do we mean by work? Do we mean the word cure? Do we need the word heal? So let's take care of that real quick as an aside from our story. Curing means there's no longer a visible symptom. Healing means there's a shift. There's something that shifts. There's something that is closed. There's something that is lifted. And the outer appearance may have nothing to do with that healing. Are we clear? So there can be a healing without a curing. There can be a healing without a curing. I had a friend whose husband went to see John of God, who is a healer in Brazil. And I met this woman several years after the passing of her husband, and she happened to share this story because I'm pretty fascinated with John of God myself. And she said, "Oh yeah, we went to Brazil. We went out through the rainforest." She's like, "Yep, we did it. And I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "My husband had an experience of which all of his symptoms disappeared. We came back home. We resumed life as if nothing had happened. Within 3 months, the symptoms were back." I said, and her name is Cindy, I said, "Cindy, what do you think really happened?" She said, "I think that when we affirm healing, we believe in healing, we want that healing, we can have it." She said, "But there's a whole lot that we have to give up if we're going to keep it." So that's just a little food for thought. Here's what Charles Fillmore says about how we each respond differently to healing methods. And I'm quoting a talk that he gave in 1914. This is what he said. "We are here tonight to get the truth along some line, and we know that somewhere there's a treatment that will heal everyone. Spiritual mind healing covers every need of the human family. It's the foundation of being itself. Everybody's been helped by some treatment although all are not helped by the same treatment. You might take some statement of the truth and repeat it over and over and realize a great improvement, but another might use the same statement for the same trouble and not be helped. The essential thing is to get the statement that fits your case, whether it be in the form of words or a passage of Scripture, and use it faithfully. So Charles Fillmore invited people, when he was giving a lecture, into that awareness in 1914. Healing is assured, the methodology, not so much. So what do we do? What do we do when we begin to experience something in our life in which we need a healing? That's what we're going to continue to explore throughout this summer. Because there's body healing, there's mind healing, there's emotional healing, and there's spiritual healing. And when we talk about the body, we're talking about matter over matter. We're talking about a change. And there's a belief in the power of that condition that our body is experiencing. So maybe we take herbs. Maybe we take medication. Maybe we take an experience like going to John of God, going to have something assist us in our healing. Remember the story of Jesus with the man who was blind? What did he have that man go and do? Basically to create something out of clay, thank you, and place it on his eyes. And when he washed it off, the man could see. So sometimes that's the experience that occurs. So let's go back to another story. Go back with me to Genesis. Go back to the Garden of Eden. Go back to the story of there's the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Remember, that's the tree that, quote unquote, God had told Adam, you can have everything in the garden, but not fruit of that tree. And so as a culture, we've been indoctrinated that there was a serpent or a snake. It was kind of conniving, tempting Eve. Don't you want this fruit? What if it really wasn't fruit? And it was a grounded presence that says, don't you want to be able to differentiate between the truth and the illusion? What if that's the knowledge of good and evil, is the ability to discern between truth and illusion? What if our healing journey is just as if we're standing in front of that tree with all that beautiful fruit, and yet we don't know which one is exactly for us? So sometimes we take a chance. Sometimes we go, well, I'm going to try this one. And that's okay. People come to me and say, I didn't get the healing I wanted. I must not have been praying right. No. That's when I say, let's pull out our You Pray and send a prayer request every day. It's not about praying enough or praying right. It's finding that place within our consciousness that discerns what is the truth for us and what is the illusion. Let's go back to John of God for a moment. There's a man that lives in Brazil, outside of Brasilia, Brazil, that people from all over the world, including Wayne Dyer, including Edwin Gaines, very, very infamous Unity minister, who've gone to have healing experiences. And so whatever it is there, those people who go must believe that that's what's theirs to do. As we're on a healing journey, whether it's that body experience of matter over matter, whether it's the mind healing is where we have a belief, and so we can change our thought. Wonderful to go to see John of God if you believe. If you believe, 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 if you that it will work for you. I'm going to be a little bold and say the same is true for Western medicine. If we walk into the doctor's office and we don't believe that what we can experience there can shift our physical or our mental experience, guess what? It's not going to. We could take that pill every day, and it's not going to. And so part of it is getting in touch with what do we really believe? What do we hold in our mind that influences the consciousness of wholeness that our healing experience can reveal? And that's very important. It's a consciousness of wholeness that can be revealed through our healing experience. We also have metaphysical healing. That's one of the ones I like the most. Anybody heard of Louise Hay? Yeah, her book, You Can Heal Your Life? Absolutely. Great power in that, if you believe. Metaphysical healing is the idea of our soul change because of a change in our thoughts about God. There's also spiritual healing, which is a realization of oneness. A realization of oneness that we are never separate. And there's a realization, is my other favorite line from the song John just sang. It's my responsibility to heal the wounds in me. Ah, really? No, don't tell me it's my responsibility. I'm getting a little distracted. Our kids are out in the foyer and they're dancing, and obviously I can't see the clock from here. It is time to go get an eye doctor appointment. This summer we are stepping into that place of embracing our responsibility to look at those places of wounds in us, because the core of our teaching is that we have come here to have a divine expression of the life we are. And sometimes the body shows up the way the body shows up. And yet, what belief are we going to embrace? What belief are we going to take in and feed our consciousness? I invite you to feed your consciousness with infinite potential. In all things are possible as we believe. Namaste.